It's good to have you back for more of your questions. Maj Hoop says, I saved the last session as a preset and wanted to go back and adjust a level offline. And we're talking about the Behringer Flow 8 mixer and audio interface here. I pressed demo, then my last preset, but all the levels faders are the same. Is it possible to do this offline? Thanks. All right, so you can see my Flow 8 is turned off here, and let's open up the app and I'll relaunch that just so we can see that it's off. It's gonna look for a connection. It's gonna fail because it's turned off, and we're gonna go into demo mode. Right, so now I can load a snapshot, and I've only got one snapshot in here for this, so I'm gonna load that up. So all we have to do to make an adjustment to this snapshot is make the adjustment. So let's say our adjustment is we want to mute these first two channels, but otherwise keep everything the same. We just need to go into our snapshot library and make a new save. So this will be save 2, right? And now that's there. So we can recall save 1 and go back, and those are unmuted. And now we can go look at our new save, save 2, we'll load that up, and there it is. And that's all with the Flow 8 turned off. So that hopefully should get you what you need. You just need to name a new snapshot. No big deal, hopefully. And you can delete the old one. You don't have to keep both, but it can be handy to have both to toggle between in some situations. But if it's just a little tweak, make a new preset, delete the old one, you're all set. Thanks for the great question. And another good question on one of the Behringer Flow 8 mixer videos from Carter Lanes here. And Carter asks, how reliable is the Bluetooth connection in terms of distance and tendency to drop out? So the bottom line with Bluetooth is it is a consumer-oriented technology. I've used different Bluetooth devices from all sorts of different audio companies, even dedicated ones meant to receive Bluetooth specifically for connecting up to a mixer, and they all have the same downfalls. They're all susceptible to interference, and it's extremely difficult to have any confidence in when those issues will arise, seeing how you don't have any information on the connection status or signal strength or what else is going on in the spectrum around where they're operating. So if you're playing a small venue, for instance, where you might want to use a mixer like this and the venue is empty when you're setting up and sound checking, everything could be absolutely fine. But then you bring a couple hundred people into the venue for the show with their cell phones and AirPods and other Bluetooth devices. Maybe it's a coffee shop gig and people have laptops, and the quality and reliability of your Bluetooth connections can really go downhill in a hurry. So we try not to rely on wireless like this in professional settings. It's definitely a nice convenience for control, but if there's a possibility to run a hard cable or to use a wireless technology that gives us some more feedback, we always do that. It's going to depend on what device you're using to connect to as well. So depending on if you have an iPhone, an Android phone, a tablet, or whatever else you're trying to connect, that radio and that device is going to be the other half of this connection, and that makes a big difference too. M. Rajesh says, which is the best audio mixer for church? And I responded a few days ago to that, and it said depends on a huge amount of factors. What's your budget? How many inputs do you need? How many outputs do you need? That's always an expensive one. What type of mixing are you doing with the console? Is it going to be for live or maybe for broadcast or recording? If you're looking for a new mixer in this price range for churches, I suggest the Allen & Heath Z mixers are quite good and very reliable. They also have some audio interface capabilities. And if you go a little bit higher, you can get into the Soundcraft Signature 12 mixers, which are very usable mixers for house of worship settings. And the response to that was just for 16 channels and music, instruments, one keyboard, and some pads in a hall about 160 feet in length. So unfortunately, with this kind of price point where the DM16 is priced under $400, you just don't have a ton of options. And if you really do need 16 channels, your options are even more limited. The reason I wouldn't go with this mixer for a church that needs to use 16 channels is simply that there are no high pass filters. I mentioned that in the video. This mixer is really designed more with electronic music in mind, people using synths as opposed to live microphones. So there really just isn't enough EQ or low cut to handle working with microphones on a church stage, in my opinion. I would try to stretch the budget, maybe save up a little more, maybe do a little more fundraising, and get into a digital mixing board that actually has 16 true channels instead of 12 mic inputs and then stereo channels following. So try to stretch your budget and get the most you can. And again, it's going to really depend on who's operating it at a church, whether it's a dedicated sound person that can navigate a digital mixer, or whether you're looking for the most simplified solution for anybody to walk up to and get sound out of. Either way can work, and sometimes digital mixers can make that simpler because you have presets to recall if somebody gets confused or messes up. But in this price point, it's extremely limited what you have to choose from, especially if you need that many microphone inputs. But thanks for the great question, and I hope I can help again in the future if you have even more details to share. And from William Ivan, we have a very common question. This one is in response to a Flow 8 video about the Behringer Flow 8 mixer, but this is something that gets asked about on a lot of modern mixers, and especially for folks new to live sound who've maybe worked with audio software in the past. And the question is, can I use a different effect for each channel? Thanks. The response I posted a few days ago was that there are 2 effect sends on this mixer, and you can send any number of sources to the 2 effects engines using those 2 sends. Here's where the confusion is coming from, I think, and that's if your experience is with a DAW. A lot of folks only know working with effects, or they're only used to working with effects as far as dropping them in on individual channels as a plugin. And that's something you can certainly do. Lots of folks do it. There's nothing wrong with it, especially with modern computing hardware that can definitely handle it. But typically, the way we work with effects in live events, and the way a lot of folks mix with effects in their DAW, is to create sends. So you can send multiple things. You can send individual channels or mix buses or whatever sort of groups you are working with to an effect together. And then that effect will act as a common thread between different things in your mix. A lot of times if you're mixing a drum kit, for example, you want to use one reverb to place that drum kit in a space, as opposed to putting a different reverb on each individual channel, which is, again, totally valid, but you will often, doing that, end up with a completely different sound from one channel to the next, depending on how you set up the reverb. And if you're doing that and you find yourself using the same preset on each channel, well, you're burning up a lot of processing power. You think of a drum kit might be 8 or more channels, and if you're going to put a reverb plugin in your DAW on the snare drum and then something on the toms individually, and then maybe you want something on the overheads, well, that's a number of different instances of that plugin that your computer has to work and process in real time, where you could just be sending those channels together through an aux send to a single instance of that reverb and have them all living in one space together. So hopefully that clears that up, and that's a little bit more straightforward for folks moving over to live mixers from software. Give it a try next time. Create a send specifically for your effects and put the plugin on that instead, and route that back to your left-right mix, and you can blend in the wet level for a number of things at once. It's a really efficient way to get a mix together very quickly. And that's all we've got time for today. I've got a whole list of great questions that have come in the last couple of days that will be in the next few episodes, so keep them coming. If you enjoy this series, definitely like and subscribe if you're not already. And you can join the channel for as little as $1 a month here on YouTube to get some early releases, and I've got some members only videos there as well, or join on Patreon if you just want to support the channel and see it continue. Really appreciate everyone that does that. We'll see you next time.